Hello, everyone. It's Eliana Gildin, the founder of Voices of Eden, the Ancient Wisdom and Healing Music Institute. And I am delighted to bring to you today another episode in our self-love series of feminine leadership and voice. And today I have the great pleasure of having online with me Janis Gildin, who is a very powerful feminine leader. And I want to welcome you, Janis.
Thank you.
Janis, I want to ask you a few questions about what issues you've faced as a woman regarding your voice and how you've been able to overcome those issues and find your voice. Janis and I met a few years ago, and maybe you could tell your trajectory, with regards to voice, because I think that would be, what you have gone through is, I think, such a powerful story of meeting your vulnerability as power and really coming out and sharing the gifts that you have to give in the world, regardless of age.
Well, I think our own stories always sound different to ourselves when we tell them out loud than when listening to someone else describe them. So I appreciate your description of that journey. I like the way that sounds. And I did meet you, Eliana. I was responding to looking for information about midwives in Israel. I was a student midwife at the time at an older age, but that was my passion that I was beginning to follow through on. And somehow, in looking for information about certain midwives in Israel, I came upon your website talking about the power of the feminine voice and sacred sounds. And the more I explored, I had no intellectual reason that I continued looking into this. I was just drawn to the material, really viscerally drawn to the material. I was at a place in my life where I have 4 children who I raised, stayed home with. I've always been involved in birth. I made the choice at a later age, like I said, to become a midwife, to go back to school. I was in a marriage as well. I am married and was feeling less than connected with my partner and was caring for an elderly father in whose home my family was living. You're probably hearing my dog. So I was on my own journey. However, I did not have words for what that journey was. I was really taking one step at a time, putting one foot in front of the other, and trying to find my way while holding everything else together, is what it felt like.
Right.
With a lot of love and a little support. And feeling like I was really at a tipping point or transformational point where I needed to deepen my own sense of myself.
Could you, that's very powerful what you're saying. Could you, because a lot of people, a lot of women are at that point today. And I'm curious, what was your experience inside? What were you telling yourself inside that would hold you back? The point of the you know, you say a tipping point. I'm curious, what was the, what were your inner voices telling you?
Well,
What was that, what was that, if moving forward, there's always that conflict between the moving forward and the holding back. What?
Right. I think the conflict was mostly choosing to do something and follow through on something for and about myself rather than for and about the other people in my life, which is a very normal, common situation when a person has children, because, well, I made the choice that my kids came first once I started having children, and I was very settled in that choice for many, many years. And that was the tipping point when I no longer felt settled in that choice, when there was more that I needed to feel my heart beat strongly and passionately again. It had been my family, and it was still my family, yet I felt like I needed to speak. I was not speaking. I was an observer.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Right? And
Yeah.
it served me well for many years. And that tipping point, and I don't know that I can be more specific about it, but that tipping point was recognizing that being the observer and being in in the silence was not authentic. It was just not being present more than it was being very present. So I did begin working with you sort of over the phone, and one of the first things that you introduced me to was the tonal ladder. And that was something which resonated very, very strongly with me. It was working with sound to support the chakras, to support the energy centers in the body. I have been a yoga instructor. I work with energy in that way, and I had not applied sound to it. So for me, that was really a very, very deep and opening experience.
For those who have just heard this, what Janis is referring to in the body of ancient feminine lineage leadership healing sound practices, there are applications in ways that one can use one's voice to bridge that inner knowing to outer expression. And how did that impact you? I'm interested in what we spoke the other day. After a while, where we haven't spoken, really made me want to speak to Janis. And you about maybe speak about today being now Janis is a midwife. And you know what I'm really curious about, Janis? I remember our having conversations when you were studying and as we were working together. And I remember several times hearing myself say to you, yeah, but when you come out, you are not a millennial coming out as a new midwife. You are 62 years old. You're coming out as a leader already. I'm very curious. Now it's been a few years now since you are actively in the field as a leader, and I'm so curious. And I would appreciate if you would share your experience of what you're finding.
Well, being in school and then working as a midwife were two very different experiences, of course. Being in school was like any student. You have all of the uncertainties and the rigor of being in school. I had plenty to deal with in terms of self-confidence with that. So while I was a student, it was hard for me to.
Yeah, your dog has a lot to say.
Yes. Yeah. I should probably let her out, but
It's all right.
Hang on just a minute. You want to go outside? I'm going to let her out, and then I'll get right back to you.
So you know what? So while we're waiting for Janis to go out, I'd be very curious what's coming up for you as we speak. This is a unscripted interview. We had no planned questions. I really wanted to hear from Janis what her experience is with her voice from a perspective of beforehand of that tipping point that she spoke of, and the trajectory uh, of a middle-aged woman really coming into her wisdom, and going through that shift, what she went through and where she finds herself today, and what kinds of issues, with the intent of supporting other wise ones of you who may be watching, and who I hope will be inspired and empowered by what she has to say. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below, and we'll promise to respond.
And I have to say, it's never over. It's a journey. I don't feel like I have arrived somewhere. I don't feel like I am now the wise woman who is the midwife. I am a midwife. I have experience with life that puts me or brings me to a different place than people who are younger than me, doing the same work or having the babies. Either way.
What do you find as you're owning your power? Because you've really chosen to show up, and you chose to start all over again by going to school, and you chose to go for a career where you would also earn your living by sharing your wisdom and your talents. And I'm wondering how you find uh, that aspect of owning your power, of uniquely who you are. How does that impact the other midwives that you work with, and perhaps the mothers and fathers, the families who you're working with?
Well, we all try to work and speak and connect authentically with the clients with whom we work. I have a way of speaking that is deeply rooted and grounding and calming, is what I'm told. So that comes from I believe that comes from my developing that sense of self in myself. So I'm not teaching anything to anyone else. I'm just being present when I am in company with the people with whom I work. Some of the techniques that we worked with the feminine leadership, helped me along the way to develop that deeper sense of knowing, which again is not always present. And that's part of the recognition. It's not always present.
Yeah.
Of course not.
But
Right.
isn't that part of, don't you, like, isn't that part of that feminine power? And I suspect you see it a lot, in a birth world, is that there's no direct line. It's not, I think we tend to see things as we start in some place, I do something and I get to a result. Where here, there's always what I'm hearing from you is a deepening of your confidence, a deepening of your presence, and that there's always a going out, coming back in, out in, and deepening. And that's what I'm hearing you share about the feedback that you receive from people, is the presence of your voice, and your presence that has a calming effect, which it, yeah, absolutely does. Such a good example of really how your voice makes a difference.
Right. And it's also, I think, recognizing each person as an individual with a story to tell. So that idea of voice is very much present in the work that I do, because each birth is a different story.
Yeah.
Even for the same woman or person who's giving birth, so that we get to retell or rewrite our story, and it is truly coming from within.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the work. It's essential that the providers who are accompanying along the way provide a grounding environment in order for that to occur.
Yeah, that's powerful. Do you find, I'm wondering, with the women during birth, do you find them easily expressing their voice, like during contractions, or
I could make absolutely no generalizations.
No.
Each one is absolutely different. And I had to learn that, because I tried to actually apply some of what I was using that I felt was helpful for finding my own voice in birth. And I found that it is not analogous. Each experience is so unique. Each person has to find their own tools. Perhaps the tools that I can offer or techniques may work. Perhaps they won't work at all. So I had to become very willing to let go of what I thought might be a good fit, because it had absolutely nothing to do with me.
Oh yeah, no,
What
yeah,
I thought.
absolutely doesn't. My question, I was curious because when, back when we were doing the research in the NICU, this is in 2000, so this is 18 years ago. And then I remember with Mindy Levy, who's a midwife who I interviewed.
That's the midwife that I was looking up when
right. And I remember her. I mean, I remember my own experience, and then I remember in speaking with Mindy and in a lot of trainings for the midwives, that they spoke about how difficult, how for a majority of the women who they would work with, that they would not express their voices. And I wonder, so I was curious, I thought, oh, I wonder, was that a factor because it was, those times, because that's already almost a generation, it's over 20 years. So I was just
it's a process. It's just a process. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what would you, in closing, what would you have to suggest to a woman who is at a tipping point and really, that place you spoke of, that she senses that something is next she doesn't have words for it, and she's weighing her words. And she, instead of speaking up, she just meditates it away, or any number of sundry things. What words of wisdom do you have to support her in moving that she can know that there actually is there is a solution? I'm not gonna, like, how,
Well,
what
but
words of wisdom do you
I,
have?
I think I would say make one change, one tangible change in what you do, and then give that change some time to manifest, to see what you see differently or how you see differently, and recognize that all change takes time. Surround yourself with people who support your change, and seek guidance from those who you feel, in whatever way, have valuable wisdom to share, because it's important that we receive teachings from each other, and that we open up to the idea of the circularity of feminine thought, and to the sisterhood or commonality of passing on wisdom to each other, so that we build bridges rather than walls, which is a very apropos comment right now. And it's true that women, when we work together, we come to know ourselves individually better.
Well, that is so powerful. Choose one thing and focus on that. Thank you so much, Janice.
Thank
And
you.
where can we find you? What's your website?
Um, my website's not up yet, but I have an email address.
Okay, yeah. What's your
It,
email address if people
it
want to contact you?
Woven Tribes. It's one word. WOVENTRIBES @gmail.com.
Great. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.